Hi, and welcome. I'm Nicole Aguiar, an event coordinator with Trade Press Media Group. Thanks for joining us today for the lift station and pump station fundamentals, understanding your wastewater and stormwater stations. Our presenter today is Jeff Urban. Jeff has over 8 years of water resource management experience working directly with some of the largest retailers and property management groups in the United States for stormwater and lift station solutions. Jeff's first experience in the facility maintenance world provided solutions to regulatory stormwater NOVs. He has experience throughout the country with some unique demands and requirements at the local and state levels. Today's webcast learning objectives include conceptualize the inner workings of lift and pump stations to better understand system electrical and plumbing components. Learn how lift stations are utilized throughout the country and the importance of preventative maintenance to mitigate environmental and sanitary disaster. Explore case studies and real-life examples that showcase the economic, environmental, and safety benefits of lift station maintenance. And understand the needs of your lift station system and the common signs that action is required. Before we get started with today's webcast, I'd like to cover a few details about today's event. A live question and answer session will follow today's presentation. To submit questions, please navigate to the question and answer button at the bottom of the screen and type in your questions. Our presenter will answer as many questions as time permits. You will receive a PDF copy of today's presentation slides about 24 hours after the conclusion of today's event. You will also receive a link to a brief online assessment. Upon successful completion of this assessment, you will receive a CEU certificate. Today's webcast will also be archived at facilitiesnet.com/webcast. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
Thanks, Nicole. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining today. And as Nicole said, really the purpose of this presentation is to give you a brief and kind of a simple overview of what a lift station is, what are the common components and the basic components of those lift stations. We'll talk about some real world examples of where we provided solutions to common lift station issues that pop up. And then finally, we'll get you some action steps at the end on if you start to observe some issues with your lift station, what steps the next take in order to take care of those issues. So really it's just a class in basic lift station 101. As I understand, most of you here attending today maybe don't know a whole lot about lift stations, and believe me, I was in your same shoes about 8-10 years ago when I got into wastewater and this career. So right now I've been able to have good opportunity to work with AQUALIS and work with some of the largest companies in the United States and the world on dealing with their issues. My job is to basically be that liaison between our clients and our largest clients and the issues that they deal with. A lot of times we're handling emergency situations, and I can get the people, our trained technicians and the people managing those crews out there in the right spot to get these issues taken care of. As we talk about lift stations, we'll get into some terminology. Obviously, a lift station is meant to move wastewater, which includes sanitary wastewater, which is everything that gets flushed down the toilet. And also there's lift stations out there that are dealing directly with stormwater. In either case, there's a lot of things that get flushed down these systems. The pumps that are in your pits and moving this wastewater, they're taking on a lot of debris, and they're in a pretty harsh environment. I know a few years ago, there was a show on television called Dirty Jobs, and this is, I think this would qualify as one of those dirty jobs with the things that, again, get flushed down the toilet. Just an everyday, what's meant to be flushed down the toilet, and then as well as what people try to get moving down the sewer lines. So we'll talk a little bit about how this system comes together. And a quick funny story before we start, but you know, I have a 7-year-old son, and he had some buddies over recently, and we were dealing with an emergency situation for a large client of ours, and I think he's at the age now where he's picking up on a lot of things we say, and really taking notice. But he made a comment to my wife later in the day that all Daddy was talking about all day was how underwear were flushed down the toilet, and he and his buddy just thought it was hilarious every time I said it. So, you know, for that particular day, he and his buddies thought I had the best job in the world. I just get a potty talk all day. But that is some of what we signed up for here at AQUALIS, and we're happy to help out in any way we can with our clients. So with that, again, we'll get started today in the presentation. As Nicole touched on, our learning objectives is really just, again, a basic understanding of these lift stations. We'll start with some simple diagrams. Again, we're going to get into how the components of these things work. You'll see there's a lot of intricate components that have the ability to get tangled up or get damaged. We'll talk about the importance of maintenance and how that plays into keeping your system going well. And then finally, again, touching on some simple action steps you can take to not only be alerted when problems arise and how to take care of those problems, or at least get the situation started. So with that said, let's jump into it. Purpose of the lift station. We've got a pretty simple diagram here, and whether we're talking about retail centers, could be an apartment complex, whatever the property that you own, sometimes they are built in a situation where they are basically downhill from where the wastewater needs to go. In a perfect situation, everything's nice and flat. When a store is built, the sanitary and/or stormwater system can use gravity, and the way they lay the pipes in the ground to just basically gravity feed out to where the wastewater needs to go. There are certain situations, you know, obviously real estate, they're not making, sorry about that. They're not making much more real estate anymore. So there are certain situations where buildings are built in situations where gravity cannot work for us. And that is where a lift station comes in. So in this situation, there's a pretty simple diagram. Again, this is the building where you might manage. That wastewater is collected, moves through gravity, and the lift station actually lifts this water up, and again, uses gravity to feed out to the city sewer line or wastewater line. So that is lift station 101 in a nutshell, and why there are situations where lift stations are required. Lift stations are very common in coastal regions where water table issues might arise. Florida is a hotbed for lift stations. You dig a couple feet down, pretty much anywhere in Florida, you're going to be starting hitting groundwater. So lift stations are very important and very heavily regulated in areas where there's sensitive watersheds, and/or again, very, very common in coastal regions. Other than that, I think from experience, our customers, it seems like the locations throughout the middle of the country are a little bit more random. Again, a lot of the time, the best place to put that particular store might be a little downhill from where the water needs to go, and the lift station's installed. But we probably only see that, you know, in our customers with quite a few stores, maybe in 5–10% of the locations. So it's not a very common occurrence, as we'll learn later in the slides. Some customers and we may not even know what we have on site, because these things can quickly be out of sight, out of mind. We'll touch on that later in the slide, but again, this is a basic diagram of why you would have a lift station in your system. That said, there are a couple types of lift stations. As I alluded to before, there's stormwater lift stations that are basically just meant to move your stormwater that's collected on your property out to either the city MS4 or the nearest creek, or wherever that stormwater is meant and designed to go. There are also sanitary lift stations that are meant to move whatever's coming down the toilet, again, off the property and into the city main. And a lot of times these systems can be connected, a combination of the two basically, where these systems may collect all wastewater, whether sanitary or stormwater, and move that off the property. We typically see a couple of different types of systems. One would be an above ground system. Here's an example here on the lower left of an above ground stormwater lift station. This is at a client of ours. Typically, we do not see above ground as commonly as we would a submersible pump system. And this is really twofold. The above ground is susceptible to freezing, except for places where it's supposed to stay warm. I know this past winter, and we can talk all day about climate change and just climate extremities that we're seeming to experience more and more. And we could have a couple hour discussion on that. But, you know, yes, Florida is not supposed to freeze, but it froze this past spring. There were a lot of issues with above ground pipes and things like that, you know, given the extreme weather that Florida and Texas and places like that down south experience. So not as common as we see submersible types. But again, we see this more in the stormwater field where there are these are the bigger turbine pumps right here in the gold. These are meant to move a high volume of water very quickly when the need arises. Obviously, you get a heavy storm that's dumping 4 or 5 inches on your impermeable pavement and rooftops at your center. We don't want things to flood, and all that stormwater rushes into a collection area, usually a pond, and sometimes that has to be moved very quickly. In a system that's above ground, makes a little bit more sense, and we can put some bigger pumps in there that can handle that load. Now, that said, submersible pumps are a little bit more of our day-to-day, probably 90% of what we deal with on a day-to-day basis. These are great. The pumps are meant to be submerged and actually sit in wastewater and water for a majority of the time. They're a little bit more modern. Obviously, as we touched on, real estate is hard to come by. We can set these down, and we'll have some later pictures of kind of how these set. And to give that, you know, topside available real estate to be utilized, and it's kind of out of sight. But, you know, I mean, it can be definitely out of sight, but the problem with that, and depending on the location of your units, it can also be out of mind as well. So part of our, you know, one of our first steps we recommend is getting a basic understanding of your property, where these lift stations may be located. They can be located almost anywhere, as we'll touch on later. But the key is knowing what you have, where it is, and keeping an eye kind of moving forward. As we get into this slide, and also a very, I'm sorry, a very important part of your lift station is your control box. The control panel is basically where the power comes in and controls the pumps in the station. We see oftentimes, you know, maybe a lot of emphasis to put on the pumps themselves and what's going on in the substation. But the control panel is just as important. If we're not getting power, or some of our electrical components aren't working correctly, that can cause a lot of major issues. And I'll kind of briefly run through some of the components of a basic control panel. First one being the alarm signal. This one's probably the most apparent and pretty easy to understand. As we'll get into later in the slide, in the presentation, we'll show the system and how it alerts those nearby as an issue with the lift station. So this is exactly what it is. It's meant to alarm that, hey, something's wrong going on with the station and attention is needed. Additionally, we'll get into operational information. This particular control panel we see 2 pump system. Basically has an hour meeting or some kind of time reading on how often and how long these pumps have been running. These can be reset when new pumps are installed and kept an eye on, basically for reporting situations. We're also talking about leak detection signals. Obviously, the pumps need to be connected and well connected to move the wastewater out of the system. If there's any kind of pressure situation where the pump is not moving or overworking, or the pressure is not right within, these lights would, indicator lights would light up, indicating a possible breach in the piping, or how the pump is sitting. And these are very simple indicator lights, are just running. You can know when the pump's on; those would light up green and indicate that the lift station is working. Up here we have the main power breaker and the emergency power breaker. These are just like the breakers in your home. A lot of lift stations do have emergency, are connected to an emergency type generator in case the main power, or I know a couple years ago, hurricanes down in Florida knocked a lot of power out for a lot of days down in Florida after that hurricane. And a lot of stations, obviously people still need to go to the restroom. Stormwater may still need to be moved when power is out. And so these lift stations play an important role in that, and they need the power in order to work. So again, a lot of them are hooked up to the emergency generator. And this right there is just an indication and a breaker for that system. Pump controls here, basically your on-off switches. A lot of pumps can work in either auto or hand operation or manual. We'll get into how auto works with floats, and how these things detect the water level and move automatically. If anything goes awry, we can get into a manual situation where you just flip the switch and turn it on, and it's going to run until you turn it off. So a lot of different things going on with the panel. But again, very, very simple kind of once you take a look at it. And then continuing on kind of simple diagrams, here's kind of what a kind of a cut sheet of what a lift station would look like if we were in the ground, kind of looking at it on the same level. And we'll kind of go through, what these are meant to do. But first of all, the water is going to enter through the inlet. This is connected, upstream to your toilets or wherever the wastewater is coming in. That water is going to come in through the inlet and start filling up the sump station itself. Here's our simple diagram of the pump, and here's the outlet piping. That water is going to fill up enough to trigger. These are all floats, and we'll get into what these floats are called and what they're meant to do. But these floats will do exactly that, float like a bobber when you're fishing, turning on and telling the electrical system to open up and start delivering power to the pump to reduce and move this water out of the system. When those are triggered, pump is activated, lowering the water level. And then finally, it's lowered down enough where the whole system shuts off again. On this outlet piping, there are a couple items here that you'll see in red. This would be called a check valve. Basically, we want the water flowing in one direction out of the system. If there's a clog or anything going on downstream, we do not want that water entering back into the station. So this check valve basically is a very simple valve that uses pressure from one end and just doesn't allow, almost like a garage door that opens one way. And when the pressure from the outside tries to go back in this direction, it won't allow the water back. This is an isolation valve or a ball valve. Basically, much like if you have an irrigation system at home, you can be able to turn that handle and shut the water flow totally off from either direction. A lot of times this ball valve would be used if one pump needs to be replaced. We don't want water, kind of going either way. We can shut that off and make sure we do any replacements without a whole bunch of water maybe coming back in. Check valves and isolation valves can go bad with time. And as we get into preventative maintenance and how important that is, we'll touch on the importance of getting a qualified person in there to make sure to test your system to make sure those are working. Moving on, somewhere along the line, long before my time in the lift station world, when stations are designed that are fairly deep, we typically see rails. And rails are basically, as we add this animation in, two stainless steel, typically tubings in your lift station, a lot of times in deeper wells where the lift station itself can slide in and out and be seated in there without having to go all the way down into some of these systems. We've seen some of these systems 20 feet deep. Having a railing system in there for your pumps to stay on not only creates a kind of a sturdy seal down at the bottom, they connect with a disconnect flange at the bottom where they slide right down these rails, connect to the piping, in a watertight seal right here. And these rails are basically a guide to make sure everything is staying in one place. Again, we typically see, I would say the average lift station may be 8 to 10 feet deep, and most would have a rail system. There are some rails and there are some systems, I should say, that maybe only 4 or 5 feet deep. Maybe you have a loading dock that has a pump in it. If it's just 3 or 4 feet down where the water collects in the loading dock and we got to move it back up, then it may not have a rail system. But rails are important things. They're important to stay. Obviously, make sure they're nice and secure. If they start getting loose and rattling, it makes the pump and the connection down here become loose. And obviously, we want everything watertight, and we want that wastewater moving when it's supposed to. So very important piece, and but very simple at the same time. Moving on, the float system as that diagram, and we'll come back to that on the next slide. But the floats are just that. They are a water level sensing system that are controlled by a tether, which electrical current can flow through. When these floats literally start to float, the components inside will turn on or turn off your pumps or your system or alarms. There are typically, when we see a lift station, a lot of times there's 2 pumps in there. In this case, there looks to only be one. Here are the rail systems. The pump is down here under the water, but you can see right here is the float and the float tree. Very important for these to be seated correctly. Obviously, whatever your system is taking on, and we'll get into this a little later, but trash, debris, anything floatable can sometimes get tangled up in these floats, and we don't want that happening. We need these, free flowing, and as the water level rises, make sure that they can tell the system to turn on and off. And if there's ever an issue with the floats, this is where that manual or hand operation would come in play to at least relieve the station of the water, put it in manual mode, run the pumps, and then turn it off when the water pumps down until you can get a qualified lift station tech on site and taking care of that float issue. And here we'll kind of get through, we're back to our cut sheet. Here's a little bit, another diagram of what floats could look like. They have weights to kind of keep them in the same place, but allowing the very end of them to move with the water level. But again, in a 2-pump system, so if we imagine another pump right behind this one, same thing, they will eventually connect either inside the well or a little bit downstream. They'll connect, the water's going to go to the same place, the piping will kind of tee in and connect. But a 2-pump system is going to typically have 3 or 4 floats. A lot of the times we like the 4 floats. As we talk about this is the first float, and the lowest float is typically the off float. It basically turns the system off when that water gets below it. Secondly is the lead float. The lead float engages the lead pump or first pump. The first and second pump, often called the lag pump, would be triggered by the third float. A lot of times in a system that's properly designed, the system would be alternating, meaning that there's just not one pump taking the brunt of this every time. When the system resets at the end, after the total cycle, the lead and lag will switch to make sure we keep the system basically, again, not one pump taking the brunt of the work every time. And then finally, pump number 4 is your alarm float. And this would trigger that alarm on that control panel that we looked at before. So if the water level rose as high as to trigger this alarm float, that means, hey, something's going on and we need attention right away. In a perfect world, this alarm float would probably be just below the inlet. Once the water rises above this inlet, no more water is going to be coming in. That's when your toilets back up. That's when ponds start, not draining, because there's no water. There's no way, nowhere for that water to go. The pressure is too great on the outlet side, and everything's just kind of stuck. So we would want that alarm float maybe just below this, to where if it starts to trigger, we know the action is needed ASAP before the system um, starts backing up. Um, and further, in unique situations, we'll talk a little bit about inline grinders. So I'll go back to this slide real quick, but an inline grinder, when the situation calls for it, would sit right at the inlet pipe, and basically grind anything that would come into the station. In our experience, given in some of the retail world and everything else, there is a lot of stuff that gets flushed down these toilets. I know, besides, flushable wipes, were, very common, have been very common, and a very, a big issue for normal sump pumps and lift station pumps. These flushable wipes don't biodegrade very easily. They clog, and clog up the systems. Anything running through these grinder teeth are going to get basically obliterated, and then this would discharge into your station, meaning your station's taking on nothing but superfine material that can be pumped up and moved out through the system. A typical lift station pump that's 2 or 3 horsepower can typically take on, a 2 or 3 inch solid anyway. But anything over that, believe me, we've seen, as I alluded to earlier, underwear getting flushed down the toilet. The elastic bands are horrible for these pumps. I know the company that we partner with, JWC and Muffin Monster, who design and manufacture these systems, told me once they're finding garden hose brass in garden hose ends, trying to go through these systems, and these have a safety feature where, if something super hard came in there where these grinder teeth couldn't get it, it's going to eject it. It's going to alert the system. But we'll touch on this a little bit later in the presentation about, when a grinder is right for you. There is a little bit more upfront cost, but just know when these are put in, your system almost becomes bulletproof. These constantly run. These will always run. They never shut off. 24/7, 365 a year. They're meant to, take on that load. They self-cool. So it's a very sturdy system, and they are very, very well made. And we're excited to partner with them and installed several of these across the United States, and have just been a huge relief for the customers when we install these, and these are necessary. But again, we'll touch on that in a case study, and give you some ideas when an inline grinder can be right for you. And then basically in the kind of the second part of our discussion, we'll kind of talk about, we've talked about literally all the moving parts of your basic lift station. All these moving parts are very susceptible to damage, wear and tear, etc. So we're going to talk about the importance of preventative maintenance and how that plays a big role in keeping your station safe. As we talked about earlier, run to fail, out of sight, out of mind. Again, here's a good indication where here is the lift station sump. That particular station goes down 10, 12 feet. It's a great design. It's out of the way. It's nice and flat, securely locked, and safe. But oftentimes these can be tucked away in far off places. This one's way out on the edge of a property. This one's out in the parking lot. Here's one in a back closet that, when these stores and buildings are designed, sometimes they, put these in odd places which aren't very easily seen and or, noticed every day, day in and day out. So the importance of, getting on a preventative maintenance program, or at least being aware of your system, where it might be. If this is way out in the parking lot and nobody's coming by and the alarm bell, the alarm signal's going off, we need to be able to keep an eye on that so things don't back up. But generally, and it's not a It is not a a downplay on anything. Sometimes even the biggest companies in the world, they don't know what they have. Things are designed, designs are lost through the systems, and all of a sudden we might discover that we have a lift station that we haven't looked at in a while. And again, we cannot stress the importance of preventative maintenance and inspections to keep these systems, on the up and up. And as we talk about preventative maintenance and in the run to fail method, unfortunately, sometimes these, whether by by design, meaning that, hey, we're just going to install this thing and we're going to run until it fails, and then we'll replace at the time. Sometimes that is just the situation that a customer or person might be in. And then the other situation might be the maintenance invested method. But these graphs kind of indicate the run to fail investment method. Basically we have a brand new station here. It's in excellent condition. If you don't do any inspections, you don't do any maintenance, over time that system is going to start to deteriorate in quality and in functionality. It's going to deteriorate to the point where it's going to need eventual replacement, and that cost is typically just a straight up and down arrow. A full lift station overhaul can be anywhere between $20,000 and $45,000, depending on your system. In my day to day, when I work with our clients, those unexpected extreme costs like that are what we're trying to avoid. And so we work with our clients, and a good stewardship of a customer system typically would put that on a maintenance plan. And so with a maintenance plan, you can keep the system, this line indicates up here, in excellent condition, kind of moving forward. You're going to have some peaks and valleys. Things are going to get tangled up. Things might fail due to who knows what, but typically they're going to stay in good working, excellent condition, with a little bit of cost in the maintenance situation down here. So the key there, again, in my day to day is, an average full preventative maintenance cost might be $500 to $900 a visit on a lift station. A lot of our customers and lift station, a lot of them are quarterly type systems where we're coming out there 4 times a year, a couple of times a year, 1 time a year. It's not a thing where you need to be there every day or even every month unless required, but just keeping an eye on that. And that small upfront plan cost usually is a better situation for for the clients that we deal with, and it keeps you, in good standing, and it keeps you in good standing and knowing what's coming up. So there is situations during a maintenance visit where we might know that, hey, we're probably going to see some upfront costs depending on what we're seeing. At least our customers can plan for that, and that's typically a better situation, to kind of know it's coming. Some common deficiencies that we're seeing when we go out for a maintenance visit is just buildup, solids, grease, fibrous materials, wet wipes. Again, we'll touch on some of the things that COVID has presented us with PPE here in the next couple of slides. But there are things that get flushed down the toilet that don't always are the best thing, and we got to keep an eye on that during maintenance. Electrical failures. I'll show you some internal workings of a control panel here in the later slides, and you can see all the wires and everything going everywhere. Good thing we have a lot of qualified technicians on our side, because they know what they're doing. And but these things can get tangled up, or wiring is incorrect. We've seen pumps wired backwards in the past when nobody can understand what's going on when the system's not working. So very, very key to have that wired correctly and get the proper power. As we talked about before, piping, joint alignment, backflow valves, making sure they're in good standing. Our ball control valves, everything needs to be solid piping on the way out. Make sure that wastewater is being moved. Floats, obviously the indicators to when the system's turning on, they can get tangled up. They can be basically set incorrectly if the water levels We can always tweak during maintenance if water levels or things are trends are saying that these floats need to be tweaked as far as the levels. We can make that adjustment during maintenance. And so always something to be on the lookout for. Pump capabilities. We have seen, especially in cases where maybe a pump has failed for whatever reason, and a new pump is put in. Maybe it doesn't match the system. Maybe it has the wrong horsepower. But basically, these pumps are originally designed to be put in with the length of pipe on the outlet, the amount of water that they need to move. Every pump has a performance curve, basically telling you how much water they can move and how much time, how much pressure they can put in the system. Very, very, very important to have the properly designed pump in your system to keep things in good shape. And then finally, just abrasive wear. Impellers inside the pumps themselves get worn out, system deterioration, even the tank itself can be taking on a very hard situation and starting to crack or wear, causing outside issues. Moving on, as I touched on, COVID, personal protection equipment. In the day and age we're living in with COVID, again, a lot of this stuff gets flushed down the toilet, gets left in parking lots that eventually, blow into your pond and get moved to your stormwater lift station. It's really become a big issue. We talked about, maybe sanitary wipes are kind of quote unquote baby wipes. Now we have antibacterial wipes that, are more common. And so, a lot of this stuff gets flushed down the toilet, gets into your pond, and we want to make sure your system can handle this. And is causing more issues over the last year for sure. As we talk about maintenance, a lift station professional, in our eyes, he is that part electrician, part plumber. You have the plumbing aspect of these pumps and the piping and everything that goes along with that. And then, as you can see, this is inside one of those control boxes. Here are the nice clean switches on the outside, but a lot going on the back end. And I apologize, pretty sensitive. A lot going on the back end on these control panels, and a true lift station tech has capabilities in both. He can get out there, make the proper adjustments, both plumbing wise, and again, I apologize, I didn't even touch that one, but and also take care of the electrical issues on the back end. So one person, one stop shop. That's the basically the basics of a true lift station professional. Our techs in-house here at AQUALIS are very experienced, have a lot of years in the industry, but we do stress the importance of getting the correct person, no matter who you use for your maintenance, getting out there to make sure they have the experience and the knowledge to take care of your issues at one time. Routine maintenance visits, again, as we've touched on, it's basically an evaluation of the system. We're going to look for any deficiencies, and we're going to basically record all the information for that particular visit, so we can look at if situations arrive in the future. We can look at the history. Was it getting the proper voltage? Was there any issues going on? We would take this lift station maintenance inspection form as a good example, provide that to the client upon completion. A lot of times the municipalities require proof that you've been maintaining your system. In this, we'd be able to submit this to any city jurisdiction to let them know, hey, here we have been maintaining, here are the results. And so just a simple look at what a basic lift station maintenance inspection form would look like. And then as we talk about, to recap, we've covered the basic makeup of your lift station, the basic components within. We've spoke to the importance of maintenance and the proper technician to be on site, and how key that is. And in the next couple of slides, we'll go through some case studies, some real world examples of, where, we've been able to come in situations and where this comes to play in real life situations. The first study here that we'll take a look at is the inline grinders, like the JWC Muffin Monster that we looked at earlier in the slide. but we had a client in a station. It was an old station, almost 30 years old. They were paying nearly $6,000 a month in emergency pumpings and jettings. The station continuing to clog, pumps being ate up and burned out by sucking up wipes or whatever else was being flushed down the toilet. So much so that they were paying this over an 18-month period. The solution was we came in, we did a comprehensive study, return on investment study, and yes, a station overhaul with a grinder cost a little bit of money, but that upfront cost was able to be returned within almost a year and a half, and then subsequent savings of about $72,000 a year. And again, I'll touch on when a grinder is right and how we go through that process. But again, just a real world situation when amazingly enough, some stores or facilities get into a situation where it's not easily tracked or anything, but the cost per month is skyrocketing, and then all of a sudden somebody notices it after a certain amount of time that, hey, we're paying a lot here on these emergency call outs. Let's look at a longer term solution and get this figured out. I know the program manager for this particular site, obviously a good chunk of money on the upfront cost, and the return on the investment was well worth it. But I think her quote to us at the end of this was, just the relief from all the headaches and the day-to-day grind and what's going to popping up with this particular store was, in her words, priceless. So obviously, if you're managing something like this, we all, maybe all have those sites or stores that maybe are the problem sites. And this was good to get off her plate, and happy to report, I think almost 3 years later, not one single issue other than just preventative maintenance that they've dealt with at that particular store. This particular case study, we're talking about that lift station professional. Again, part plumber, part electrician. Here on the left, these pictures right here are of the station as we found it, kind of piecemealed together. We've got wires going everywhere. The station was old, really not set up in the right situation and out of service when we got there. We were able to come in with one technician and his crew, get a new panel installed. Here's what a properly installed brand new panel looks like on the inside, nice and neat, with all the control units on the outside. And then here's what brand new pumps, brand new outlet piping, floats in the right position here on the right. But we're able to, again, a store that was just having chronic problems and patches and everything throughout the years, able to get that expert on site and relieve that store of their situation. And then and lastly, as far as the case studies go, here we have a situation where, kind of the out of sight, out of mind situation, run to fail. We have a site where our customer didn't even know this is one of those inline grinders, didn't even know this grinder was there, whether it was even functioning or not. The before picture right here, you can see everything, kind of the piping configurations all over the place. How do you access this grinder without, cutting this bar off? And how do you get to these pipes? You've got to, the disconnects and things weren't in the right spot. And so we were able to come in, get the grinder. The grinder did need a new part after years of non-use and abuse, but we were able to get the grinder reinstalled on the inlet. So, a quick example is the inlet's kind of coming from this direction. It's going to go through the grinder, and everything's going to be grinded and down into the sump itself. Here are the two pumps, brand new. You got your shutoff valves, your backflows down there, and these pumps would pump it up. They tee into the same outlet and eventually out the system. So again, another one where the lift station technician was able to come in and make a great save, and it was to no fault of anybody. The situation, they just didn't know the station existed and what was in it. So just a situation where we were able to come in and help out, and very, very pleased to do so, and honored to do so. But really, as we finish up the presentation, the next few slides is we want to talk about that final learning objective is what can you do, to recognize, what you have, some issues that may be going on, how to possibly prevent, and how to take action when you feel like something is needed. So we'll touch on that as we get into the last part. But action signs, and signs that action is required. There's basically 4 basic things that you could look for or have your facility manager or your store manager be on the lookout for. But we'll kind of touch on the first one, speed. Obviously, toilets not flushing or backing up is a big one. That's very noticeable. But just even lift station drainage speed, popping the lid off, taking a look down there. If when these pumps turn on, and especially if both are somehow activated, these stations pump down pretty quickly. And if that water level is staying high and these pumps are constantly running, that shouldn't be happening. So it's just something that you can have your facility manager take a look at, and keep an eye on. Odor, when systems, and especially in the sanitary world, these things should not really smell. They're going to be moving a lot of this waste pretty quickly. So anytime that smell starts building up, or things, if they last too long, they become septic, and actually get considered hazardous waste. If things in your sanitary system sit for too long. So you want this stuff moving out as quickly as possible. So, keeping aware of how things smell definitely should be a good indication that maybe something's going wrong if you start to feel or start to smell that bad odor. Anything buzzing or humming, pipes rattling, in the day and age of PVC and things don't rattle maybe like they used to with the lead pipes, but the system should be nice and secure. It should not make a huge buzz or hum when these are on. Should be relatively quiet. If you're hearing that at your facility, again, probably time to call a lift station professional, get there and evaluate what's going on. A lot of times it could just be a seating issue, maybe a pipe's busted or starting to crack. But when everything's nice and secure, it's a pretty quiet system. And then finally, as we looked at the very beginning, the alarm. It's there for one reason and one reason only, to alert everybody that there's an issue with the system. So just being mindful, making sure that alarm is working. I don't know how many times we found a panel where that light is burnt out, or the electrical components going to that alarm they're not working. And so the alarm's not flashing when there's an issue. So keeping an eye on that during preventative maintenance is key. There's also situations, as we touched on before, a lift station can be out in your parking lot. It can be in a back closet where nobody's really paying attention with a lot of product around. There is technology nowadays where, in this case, Omni's crystal ball unit can be hooked up to the panel. This would be hooked up to our panel. And it basically monitors the electrical signals that, the floats and the station are sending back and forth between the panel, and with their online application guard dog, it can give you real-time emails, text alerts when lift station is activated. If there's a problem, there's all kinds of different descriptions and notifications and possible things. But it's a great new technology that's come online over the last 10, 12 years. That can give you that real-time advantage. They're actually very cost efficient, maybe $5,000 to $6,000 to install. And again, if you have a situation where those units are far off and not easily monitored by someone on site every day, could be a good investment, especially if you have to do some kind of overhaul to get those real-time alerts and make sure to take action when those come in. And then finally, as we end up here, the actions you can take, pretty easy. First one, again, especially in the day and age of, hopefully we're over this COVID thing for the most part, but that has given us new awareness to educate and spread that awareness regarding lift station safe disposal, putting signage in the bathroom, can work. PPE needs to go into the trash cans, not down the toilet, wipes, etc. Just educating and spread that general awareness can be a good first step for you. Establish a proactive routine inspections and maintenance program. Um, to monitor the current status of your systems, to possible get ahead of future issues. Very, very important to get on a program and at least be aware, and to avoid that run to fail method where that cost can just show up unexpectedly on you. Thirdly, install retrofit and repair systems, again, to no fault of anybody's. Sometimes we find these stations that haven't had any maintenance or anybody looking at them in 2 or 3 years. Believe it or not, these things can run, and are meant to, they're designed to run in a harsh environment, and sometimes they can last 2 or 3 years without anybody touching them. A lot of times it is good to at least get eyes on it once a year, clean out what's needed. But in the situation you come across one that's not functioning right, getting it back to its design is a good place to start, and that could be a good action to take. If you find one, let's look at the original plans. Let's get this thing. It was designed a certain way for a particular reason, depending on the store layout or the facility layout. Let's get it back to basically ground zero, and make sure that station is maintained moving forward. And then again, continuous monitoring through observation, through people on site, and then wastewater technology like Omni Crystal Ball is a great action that you can take. And just being generally aware of your system is a, basically a great step to take as we move forward, and you deal with your lift stations here and down the road. So that basically wraps up the meat of our presentation and the basic overview of a lift station. Again, I appreciate everybody's time today and tuning in. Hopefully you got something out of it, at least a basic understanding of how your station would look down in there, and what the purpose of it is. Over the next couple of slides, I have an opportunity to tell you a little bit more about AQUALIS, and so we're happy to do so. And again, appreciate everybody's attendance today and the opportunity to come before you and tell you a little bit more about lift stations. Who is AQUALIS? AQUALIS, we're the leading nationwide provider of stormwater and lift station management services. These services can include anything from preventative maintenance, corrective maintenance, repairs. We do retrofits, redesigns, as well as emergency response. We can help protect your assets, mitigating notices of violation. Again, a lot of these stations are regulated by, everything's regulated as far as wastewater by the Clean Water Act. And the Clean Water Act itself puts the local jurisdictions on enforcement of that, depending on where your store or your facility is located. Knowing your local code and what the original agreement when that facility was built is very key. We can help you mitigate that and learn more about what is required with your system to make sure you're in compliance. We serve as single site, multi-site organizations through our preventative maintenance programs, and happy to partner with some of the biggest retailers in the world, commercial, industrial, municipalities, healthcare, hospitality, educational, and governmental agencies. So a little bit more about AQUALIS. We're nationwide, and happy to take a look at anything that anybody needs. As I mentioned, water compliance is really not optional given the Clean Water Act. As the leader in stormwater and lift station management, we're pleased to partner and educate property owners on the importance of preventative maintenance and water compliance. In our programs, we can help facility managers avoid costly violations, reduce liability, improve system performance, and increase overall property safety. Here's a list of our extensive certifications. I'm of the opinion, surround yourself with really good and smart people, and it makes you, I need all the help I can get when it comes to my smarts. So getting the right people around you is very important. Here at AQUALIS, we have those people on staff. We're a team that prides ourselves in safety, compliance, and education. Our teams are highly specialized in the fields of stormwater inspections, certified small space training. Our certifications include those at the state level, as well as product specific like Omni Crystal Ball or JWC Muffin Monster. Many of these certifications include, continuing education and the renewal to ensure that we're following the most up-to-date regulations and processes. And in all, AQUALIS is honored to have great qualified experts working for us, and the ability to use those skills in self-performing many of our services across the United States. And that said, as we end up, if you're interested in learning more about AQUALIS and the AQUALIS difference, please contact us or check out our website at aqualisco.com. I know our number at 855-236-1160 can put you in touch with the right people. I appreciate your time today. And as we end our formal presentation, I think I'll hand things back off to Nicole and maybe answer a few questions that we may have. So I appreciate your time, everybody.
Great. Thank you, Jeff, for all the great information. As a reminder, you can submit your questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. If we don't have time to answer all your questions today, we will be sending the list to Jeff and his team. So he will still be able to answer any questions. So why don't we get started? The first question is, does this system require a VFD?
I'm not sure. Do you know the acronym for DFD? I'm not sure I know what that is.
I do not. But we can go to the second one. This question is two-part. What are the different regulatory requirements to consider for the operation of lift systems? And how many years would a regularly maintained lift system last?
Well, first part, yes, there are regulatory requirements for lift stations, as alluded to. The Clean Water Act and the EPA is basically the national overseer of your wastewater services. It's basically the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System governs that. As we talked about earlier in the presentation, they place it on the local jurisdictions in order to enforce and come up with if there's particular requirements within that local jurisdiction, depending on the location. Our experience in the field and given our reach throughout the United States, a lot of that information is we know offhand, but the best thing is to look and maybe reach out to your local water compliance official in your area or the local jurisdiction and ask what those requirements are. I know for example, if you're in Jacksonville, if you're in Duval County, Jacksonville, Florida, you got the St. Johns River right there, the watershed, very important watershed to Florida and the Atlantic Ocean and everything involved with that. They're required to have monthly inspections on your lift station and wastewater systems. And so very important to know that. And make sure you're up to snuff. But again, either partnering with a good quality lift station expert like AQUALIS or just calling directly to the municipality and asking. Their websites are very helpful on what's required. And then I believe part two, a well-maintained system, it should last, a good solid 5 to 10 years. Things are going to pop up just like your car. Oil changes are going to be needed, rotating your tires. Those small things are going to be taken care of during preventative maintenance. Every once in a while, something might go awry or the wrong piece of debris gets down there and clogs the system, burns it up. But a good maintained system should last, maybe even a decade or so. If you keep a close eye on it and make sure the items coming into that station are able to be moved or alerted quickly to where damage is not possible.
Great, thank you. So going back to the first question, does the system require a VFD? That is a variable frequency drive.
Variable frequency drive. I am not sure on that. I know that one of our technicians might be able to answer that a little bit better than me. I don't want I do not want to answer it incorrectly. So maybe if we can maybe notate that question and
Sounds good.
come back to it.
And then another question, do you have any tips for hurricane season uh, preparation for a lift station?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
Do you have any tips for hurricane season preparation for a lift station?
The biggest tip I could say would be to have a qualified technician get out there and do a full inspection. The best thing you can do is make sure that system is in good shape. All the electrical components are working. The pit itself is free of debris. Maybe taking that extra step of if there is extra debris down there, pumping all that out, making sure it's nice and clean. Again, when it comes to stormwater, and depending on your facility, a lot of trash, a lot of debris can be blown in there. Getting on a good stormwater maintenance program is very key as well. So a lot of that trash and or debris, whether it be from vegetation or algae or whatever, can be handled on the top side with a qualified stormwater technician. Is again, a lot of this is what we do day to day, and it works hand in hand, so it works well for us as a company. But taking those extra steps before hurricane season to make sure your system is good to go. Again, just I refer back to the car analogy, but be like, changing your oil and rotating your tires before a long trip. It's a good way to ensure everything's working as it should and be able to move that water if and when one of those hurricanes come in.
Awesome, thank you. We do have a few questions wondering if AQUALIS operates outside of the US, in particular the Caribbean, Bahamas, or in Canada.
We work in Puerto Rico for sure, and then that's basically the only place I think we work outside of the United States, but we are heavily involved in Puerto Rico.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is around lift stations in the aviation environment. Does AQUALIS do consolation, compliance jetting, and lift station maintenance at airports?
We can, yes. We work for some logistic companies and distribution centers. Yeah, absolutely. If you got a lift station, and at any facility, we could definitely take a look for you and help you out.
Perfect. Then I think we have time for about one more question. And for anyone's question that we were not able to get to, we will be sending them along. So the last question, are there any other pre-treatment or filtering options in addition to the grinder to prevent large objects in getting to the well or the pump?
Yes, there are certain designs where the water itself could come into a pre-treatment tank. A lot of times it has, there can be baffles that are installed. An example of that would be a grease trap in particular stores. Could be a way that wastewater from certain items within a retail setting or facility, you don't want grease going into your lift station or any debris. If you had like a pre-treatment tank and or a grease trap, a lot of that stuff would be literally trapped before it reaches, and just the clean water gets discharged to the lift station. So that's definitely an option. What we experience is, do you have the room? Basically where you're at, and we would definitely weigh that as an option to the grinders. Anything pre-treatment like that, again, needs to be serviced or it's going to fill up very quickly. Things like grease traps or pre-treatment tanks, they have to be pretty much cleaned out, monthly. And so there's cost in that, but that's definitely something we would look at and analyze if we were to look at a situation where, a grinder, may or may not be the best situation.
Great. So that once again, thank you for all the great information. Do you have any final thoughts for our audience?
No, again, I appreciate everybody's time today and the opportunity to come before you and let you know a little bit more about lift stations. Again, hopefully you got something out of it, and it was a pleasure speaking with everybody today.
Thanks so much, Jeff. As a reminder, attendees will receive a PDF copy of today's presentation slides about 24 hours after the conclusion of today's event, along with a link to a CEU assessment. Today's webcast was also recorded and can be reviewed at facilitiesnet.com/webcast. Thanks everyone for attending and have a great rest of your day.